This is why we can't have nice things. In a previous video, I spoke about the Greek concept of the telos, the end goal of a thing. For instance, the end goal, the telos, of a knife is to cut things. So if you have a dull knife that doesn't cut very well, we call it a bad knife because it doesn't meet its telos. By keeping a thing's telos in mind, we can arrive at a standard by which to measure things. The telos of a belt is to keep your pants up. The telos of shoes is to protect your feet. If you have a belt that doesn't keep your pants up or shoes that don't protect your feet, we say that these are bad articles of clothing. Contrariwise, if we have something that meets its telos, we say that these are good things. The closer that a thing comes to its ideal, to its archetype, the more that we say that it's in conformity with its telos. A perfect man, for instance, would match the archetype of a man. Insofar as you fall short of that archetype, you're said to be imperfect. The original concept of sin had no negative moral connotation. It just meant that you were falling short of the ideal, of the archetype, that you failed to match the telos. The philosopher Immanuel Kant, as we pointed out before, said that the anthropologist describes what is. The ethicist describes what ought to be. The concept of ought is a reference to the archetype of a thing, of its ideal form, its telos. Whenever we say, for instance, that a car ought to have 4 tires, we're making a reference to the ideal form of a car. In terms of ethics and human behavior, we might say, a man ought not to strike a woman, or a person ought to be respectful to their parents. These are evaluative judgments based on the concept of ideal behavior. As Hegel wrote, evil is nothing but the incompatibility between what is and what ought to be. Ethicist Alasdair MacIntyre, in his book, After Virtue, complains about how since the Age of Enlightenment, certain philosophers tried to decouple ethics from the concept of a telos. In doing so, they removed ought. Detach morality from that framework, and you will no longer have morality, he says. Adherence of a no-ought from is view could easily meet the difficulty. It is helpful to consider another type of counterexample. The no-ought conclusions from is premises thesis. From such factual premises as, this watch is grossly inaccurate and irregular in timekeeping, and this watch is too heavy to carry about comfortably, the evaluative conclusion validly follows that this is a bad watch. From such factual premises as, he gets a better yield for his crop per acre than any farmer in the district, and his dairy herd wins all the first prizes at the agricultural show, the evaluative conclusion validly follows that he is a good farmer. Both of these arguments are valid because of the special character of the concepts of a watch and of a farmer. Such concepts are functional concepts. That is to say, we define both watch and farmer in terms of the purpose or function which a watch or farmer are characteristically expected to serve. MacIntyre then says that the concept of a watch cannot be defined separately from the concept of a good watch, because a good watch is simply another way of describing a watch's telos, its archetype. Ethics starts to fall apart, says MacIntyre, when you depeg a thing from its function, its telos. Aristotle says that what distinguishes man from animals is his sense of logic, his capacity to engage in reason. So for a man to satisfy the archetype of man, he has to be rational. Insofar as you fall short of that, you are falling short of your telos. The problem today is that society banished the concept of ought and decoupled the concept of a thing from its function. Because of this, you can no longer draw any evaluative conclusions. Morality, as MacIntyre says, breaks down. For instance, according to Aristotle and Cicero, the telos of a republic is the promotion of virtue among the people. How many people know this? If they did, then they could evaluate how close a government was coming to serve its function. But by hiding this telos and pretending that government doesn't have any end goal, charlatans can hide what a bad job they're doing. Likewise, conmen might hide the fact that terms like woman or man have different defining characteristics, different end goals. A woman is that branch of the human race which has ovaries, a womb, and can give birth. This is the defining characteristic of womanness. But now people, and people who should know better, are trying to decouple a woman from her function and to tell impressionable young people that a man in a dress is a woman. The thing and its function have been separated. This leads perforce to dysfunctional people. Wayward individuals who no longer have a sense of their own telos, no longer have a sense of what is and what ought to be. How can you tell a good watch from a bad watch if you remove its function as an evaluative criterion? How can you tell a man from a bad man if you've banished the concept of the function of a man? In the book, The One and the Many, by philosopher W. Norris Clarke, he says that precision is of necessity exclusionary. In other words, gold can't be something made up of any atoms, say oxygen or helium or uranium. It must be made up of gold atoms. The precise definition is exclusionary. But we're told by moral relativists today that exclusionary thinking is bigoted, evil. Their watchword is inclusion. A family, they tell us, can be anything. A man, a woman, or a watch can be anything. Under these blurry guidelines, precision collapses, standards erode, and the whole system starts to fall apart. Depeg people from a concept of function, and they, as we said, become dysfunctional people. And that's exactly what we're watching. We banished ought and declared a war on the telos, which is the basis of ethics. And now we're a society with an identity crisis, a generation adrift, a civilization in a moral vacuum told when it comes to questions of ethics to improvise. Does it ever feel like you're not getting the full story from the media? Like there are dark and powerful forces behind the scenes manipulating national and world events? Well, you're right on both counts. To get the full story, every time, check out Behind the Deep State, hosted by Alex Newman from The New American.